We are interrupting regular programming with breaking news. Former President Jimmy Carter has died. This follows the announcement that Carter had chosen hospice care on February 18th after a series of trips to the hospital. Today we're looking back at our 39th president who called Middle Georgia home. Jimmy Carter was not just the president of the United States, he was a father, husband, public servant, and veteran. We begin our special coverage of Carter's passing with a look back at one of America's most notable figures.
President Carter, born James Earl Carter Jr. on October 1st, 1924, in the small town of Plains, Georgia, to James Earl Carter Sr., a farmer and businessman, and Lillian Gordy Carter, a registered nurse. The family later settled in the small community of Archery. Growing up, the soon-to-be president had a typical childhood. Becoming heavily involved in church, Carter also remained focused in the books as he knew he was destined to serve the nation in a much bigger way.
Well, living 2.5 or 3 miles outside of town on a farm in an isolated rural community, Plains to me was a big city.
Following his high school graduation, Carter jumped around to different schools, studying at both Georgia Southwestern College and the Georgia Institute of Technology. In 1946, he received his bachelor's from the United States Naval Academy. Shortly after, he married a woman by the name of Rosalind Smith, who he had known for quite some time. Together, the two moved around and had 4 children, 3 sons, John William, James Earl III, Donnell Jeffrey, and a daughter, Amy Lynn. In 1953, the Carters moved back to Plains, a move Rosalind deeply disagreed with. But after his father passed, Carter felt it was his duty to take over the family's peanut farm and tend to his mother. After making Georgia home a second time, Carter quickly became involved in the community, becoming a leader on the Board of Education, Hospital Authority, and Library. Carter, a Southerner, yearned to be different from the typical Southern politician, scoring his first major political role in 1962 after being elected to the Georgia Senate. But Carter's eyes were set on a much bigger prize. At just 46 years old, he became the 76th governor of Georgia in 1971.
At the end of a long campaign, I believe I know our people of this state as well as anyone could. Based on this knowledge of Georgians, north and south, rural and urban, liberal and conservative, I say to you quite frankly that the time for racial discrimination is over.
Once he was governor, he vowed to make a difference in the state. Carter often spoke out against segregation and promoted education and prison reform. Many credited him with diversifying the state's government as well. In the 1970s, following the Watergate scandal, Americans felt elected officials couldn't be trusted. But Carter set out to restore their faith. On December 12, 1974, he announced his candidacy to become the 39th president of the United States.
My name is Jimmy Carter, and I'm running for president.
Optimism filled the air as Jimmy and Rosalind Carter entered the White House with their kids in tow. America needed someone that could improve the unemployment rates and the ongoing inflation rates. Carter was a big environmentalist. In 1977, he signed the Department of Energy Organization Act, thus creating the Department of Energy, even at one point installing the first set of solar water heating panels on the White House. A year later, he helped bring amity between Egypt and Israel with the Camp David Agreement, one of the most notable accomplishments of the Carter administration. Although violence in the Middle East continues, the accords and treaties signed on March 26, 1979 remains the single greatest steps towards peace in the region.
I'm so proud of both of you.
In 1981, during his final days as president, Carter rarely left the Oval Office, overseeing the last details that would free American hostages at the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. Every day, he worked to bring them home safely.
We're using every available channel to protect the safety of the hostages and to secure their release.
Post-in-office life allowed President Carter to bring a lifelong vision to fruition. In 1982, the nonprofit Carter Center was founded. Most importantly, in 1994, when the U.S. and South Korea were on the brink of war with North Korea, Jimmy and Rosalind traveled to the country representing the Carter Center to meet with the North Korean president, ultimately resulting in North Korea agreeing to freeze its nuclear program. Since President Carter's election went so well in the U.S., He and the Carter Center helped strengthen democracy by overseeing over 100 national elections. The Carter Center continues to guide the growth of democratic institutions, ensuring that government decisions are open and transparent and competing for the public office is fair. His work through the Carter Center earned him a Nobel Peace Prize back in 2002.
We can choose to alleviate suffering. We can choose to work together for peace. We can make these changes.
Soon after leaving Washington, the Carters moved back to Plains to try and get back to a normal life. The couple sold their peanut warehouse, began writing memoirs, and President Carter became a professor at Emory University in Atlanta. Up until his death, President Carter remained deeply rooted in Plains, continuing to practice his faith as he served as a Sunday school teacher. Decades went by, and Carter still managed to volunteer once a week every year for Habitat for Humanity, even at age 95. President Jimmy Carter will continue to be remembered for not only his character and faith, but as a man who set out to make the world a better place, one day at a time.
Jimmy Carter was our 39th president. Here's a look at Mr. Carter's greatest achievements while serving in the White House.
I, Jimmy Carter, do solemnly swear
I, Jimmy Carter, do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute
that I will faithfully execute
the office of President of the United States
the office of President of the United States.
At noon on January 20th, 1977, the presidency of Jimmy Carter began. During a time of serious problems at home and abroad, Jimmy Carter served tirelessly as the 39th president of the United States. On May 13th, 1977, Carter passed House Resolution 4876.
I'm very glad to sign now House Resolution 4876 that provides opportunities for the American people to go back to work.
Providing more than $20 billion in general revenue for the American people to go back to work in hopes of ending unemployment. At the beginning of Carter's presidency, he announced troops would withdraw from South Korea.
I urge you to support the strong defense budget which I have proposed to the Congress.
Carter's presidency also faced an energy crisis.
Yesterday, the Department of Energy was created.
On August 4th of 1977, Carter signed the U.S. Department of Energy Organization Act, a national energy plan. Nearly 40 years ago, 52 lives were saved during Carter's presidency.
We're using every available channel to protect the safety of the hostages and to secure their release.
The United States freed nearly $8 billion in frozen Iran assets, calling for the release of 52 hostages.
And every one of the 52 hostages was alive, was well, and free.
And in September of 1977, Carter was head of the major breakthrough for Middle East affairs.
I saw that Holy Land region as a potential explosive point that might have brought about a superpower war.
Carter oversaw the agreement between the Israeli prime minister and Egyptian president to prevent a war from happening.
So I kept them apart. They never saw each other for 10 days, and I went back and forth. But I learned about what was special in their hopes and dreams and aspirations, their background, their obligations, their previous commitments, and so I was able finally to enmesh the two in a reasonable agreement.
It was known as the Camp David Accords.
I'm so proud of both of you.
The power of Carter negotiations were known as the most important by an American president dealing with Middle East affairs. President Carter left the White House on January 20th, 1981, and is still known as one of the most successful presidents in American history.
Rather, we should take pride that the ideals which gave birth to our nation still inspire the hopes of oppressed people around the world.
Georgia lawmakers are reacting to the passing of Jimmy Carter. We have more on some of their fondest memories with the former president and the legacy he's leaving behind.
He was a farmer in South Georgia when I was growing up, and my family farms in South Georgia, and about 60 miles apart.
Austin Scott recalls some similarities between him and Jimmy Carter, both from a farming background and both avid turkey hunters. He remembers how respectful and personable Carter was, always stopping to shake hands and introduce himself.
I think he will be remembered predominantly for just the type of quality person that he was. I think his legacy will be more around Jimmy Carter than it will be around any office that he served in.
Sanford Bishop remembers fondly Carter's work with Habitat for Humanity and even got to work with Carter building homes. He's also worked alongside Carter in several other capacities early on in his political career.
President Carter gave me my first political appointment when he was governor to the Governor's Advisory Council on Drug Abuse. And then a couple of years later, I ran for the legislature, and I ran for the legislature at the same time that he ran for president. So one of the first trips that I made as a member of the Georgia House of Representatives was to his inauguration.
Bishop says he's grateful to have had both of Jimmy and wife Rosalind's support in council over the years.
He was here for over 90 years, decades that meant something to the Middle Georgia community. Near and far, people are mourning the loss of Jimmy Carter, a loss that hit close to home. We caught up with Middle Georgia community members that remember Carter and his legacy.
From Plains to Macon, Georgia, Jimmy Carter's presence still lingers. He always called Georgia home. Macon resident Newton Collier got the opportunity to meet Carter when he visited Macon.
To me, he stands up to the top. He might not have been everything that they wanted him to be, but to me, he was one of the best.
Collier believes he was one of the best presidents America has seen.
He did a lot of things in the Georgia area and in the nation and in the world. It really helped a lot of people out.
Middle Georgia community members remembered Carter most for what he did after his presidency.
I just liked what he's done and what he has been doing since his presidency.
Kevin Schuyger wasn't alive when Carter was president, but he's seen the work Carter did.
But I thought he was a great human being and a great humanitarian.
Carter lived nearly 100 years and never stopped giving back. Middle Georgia resident Faye Tripp remembers Carter's walk in faith.
We live in a time that, people, they have fallen away from a lot of things, but that is the true mission of Jesus, the poor, to build up, to just bring healing.
Despite being a president, residents say they felt connected to Carter through his devotion to service.
I think he was the most honest and the most purest president we had because of his Christian faith.
Carter may be gone, but the work he did for the community and the people he helped has turned his legacy into hope for the future.